So thanks so much, guys, for coming out to Startup Brand Ottawa. Please help me in welcoming Joe Ridout, our guest tonight. Woo! So Joe came up all the way from Toronto to talk to us about Relay text gift messaging app, recently acquired by Kick messaging platform. So let's get right into it.
Yeah. All right. Thanks a lot for having me. Right?
Yeah, man. Thanks so much for coming up.
To be here.
For making the long drive in a blizzard.
Yeah.
So we always like to start things off by getting to know a little bit more about you. So where are you originally from?
Well, I was born in Vancouver, stayed there for all of about 6 months, and then when I was a kid, my parents kind of moved all over, so we lived in Alberta for a while, and lived in like Edmonton and way up north, northern Alberta, and ultimately moved to a small town in Quebec called Lennoxville, and grew up there, and then went to the University of Waterloo, University of Toronto, and
yeah, cool. So what was your family life like? And was anybody entrepreneurial? Did you kind of get that idea from someone in your family? Or?
So this is an interesting question. I was thinking about this a little bit on the drive over because Franco told me he was going to ask this. So my parents are both theater professors. So my dad is a playwright and teaches playwriting, and my mom is an acting teacher. So there wasn't a lot of kind of engineering culture in my family, not a ton of business savvy, but I was definitely surrounded by like the theater world as a kid. So my dad would write plays and my mom would act in plays, and I remember as a kid we used to, for a while every summer, we would drive from Quebec all the way out to Edmonton, Alberta, where there's a big festival, theater festival every year called the Fringe, and my parents would put together a show. So they'd bring some of their students from the university. We'd pick up like a set designer in Calgary and kind of this ragtag team and like put on a play for 2 weeks, and it'd be like $10 a ticket, and that was kind of all the money that we had to recoup the costs. So it was a very kind of scrappy, like entrepreneurial theater production. So I don't know if there's any parallels to be drawn to startups there.
That's awesome.
But and definitely I think my parents did kind of encourage me to take risks. We, as I mentioned, we moved around a lot when I was a kid, so the idea of kind of leaving a good stable thing to do something more risky and exciting, I guess, was always kind of came naturally to me.
Mm-hmm. And then, so you mentioned that you went to school at University of Waterloo for your undergrad, and then Toronto's for a master's. So what did you study, and did those programs, obviously in computer science, did those things have any influence on wanting to start a company or wanting to kind of create something of your own?
Yeah, definitely. I think if you're building a software startup, obviously it's great to have a background in software. And so Waterloo is a great CS program. I did the co-op program, so I got to work at a bunch of different companies. And I think it was my third work term, for my fourth work term, I went down to the Valley for the first time in 2001 to work at a startup. Never been to the Valley before. I'd worked at some bigger companies. I went down there, and this was right after the bubble had burst. So I remember my first day starting at the startup was maybe like 20 people. Somebody had pinned, this is a very small company, but I guess it had IPO'd because like everyone was IPOing back then. And I remember somebody had pinned the sort of graph of the stock price on this like bulletin board in the office. And I think when they IPO'd, it was like $140 a share. And on my start day, it was $4 a share. And throughout my 4-month work term, it went down to $2 a share at the end. And halfway through, like they took the whole office outside into the parking lot, and then they said, "Okay, this half of the people, you guys can go back in, and everyone else, you got to go." And
wow.
So as a kind of 21-year-old, down the Valley for the first time, it was definitely like a
eye-opening experience.
Left an impression. That was my first introduction to startups, and then I guess serendipitously, somebody that I met at that company who was a full-timer there, after that company shut down, he moved back to Kitchener-Waterloo, this guy Roger Scaboius, to start a startup there, and that startup, Requireless, was ultimately bought by Google and turned into the Google Waterloo office. And so that guy was kind of a big part of how I ended up at Google.
Mm-hmm. Perfect. That's a good segue. So I was going to say you started off your career working at Google on some products like Google Buzz, Google Mobile, Mobile Search, Gmail, and then Google Plus. So what was some of those? What was the most exciting part of working on some of these big projects? What was that like?
Well, I think Google was an awesome place to work. Sure you hear all sorts of great things about what it's like to work at Google, and they're all true. There's massages and funny bikes you can ride around and free food. So I think there was, probably the most exciting things about working at Google were there's some really smart people. Mm-hmm. So that's both a good thing and a bad thing. I mean, it's great in the sense that, when you're there, you can sort of tackle really hard problems, and you've got all these amazing people to work on them with. But I think in terms of preparing you to do a startup, certainly for me, I found it gave me kind of unrealistic expectations about how easy it is to tackle some problems. When you're, it's very easy for Google to attract amazing talent, mm-hmm. and there's sort of amazing resources to hire people. But when you're going out on your own and you're trying to find the similar talent, it can be pretty challenging. So working with really smart people, and then, it's pretty much anything that Google launches, you can guarantee that like 1 million people are going to look at it. So that's really exciting. It's exciting to work on stuff that millions of people are seeing. In some cases, some products, billions of people will see it. Mm-hmm. But again, there's kind of it gives you these. If you go on to do a startup after doing something like that, it gives you kind of an unrealistic expectation about like how easy it is to acquire users.
That's interesting, and it makes a lot of sense too. Yeah. So what was some of your like day-to-day roles working on some of these products? Were there any like major challenges that you remember working on, especially maybe with Google Buzz?
Yeah, I mean, well, Google Buzz was a fairly short-lived project in general, and so I can't remember. I was only on it for maybe 5 months, 6 months, or something like that, and then it kind of morphed into Google Plus. But I don't know. I mean, we had certainly very different problems from what we had at Relay. Yeah. Like I remember, for the Google Plus launch, for example, we were working on the Google Waterloo office was working on all the mobile pieces for Google Plus, and I remember they flew kind of everybody down to Mountain View. So all the people from Waterloo that were working on it, all these people from these remote offices, we were all kind of sitting in this big war room getting ready for the launch of Google Plus. And, I just remember, like, as soon as it launched, it's like opening the floodgates. Tons of, millions of people are coming to look at this thing. And it's just, the challenges are like, making sure that we've, done resource allocation properly, that all the servers are going to stay up. That's, I guess, a very different challenge from starting a company from scratch, where you're just like, where am I going to find that first 1,000 users?
Yeah, for sure. Cool. So let's shift to that a little bit more. So we'll talk about your co-founder John, I guess, who isn't here, but basically he worked at Microsoft and Amazon as well, yeah. And then actually did another startup before approaching you to work on Relay. So how is this pitch to like, hey, you should leave Google, come start a startup with me? What was that whole process like?
Well, I think I think this is a good advice for recruiting in general, is that recruiting takes time, right? So, ideally you want to be talking to people that you have an existing relationship with, and you want to be talking to them over a long enough period that the timing is right for them. So I think my co-founder John was very smart in that he started working on me pretty early, and started getting me excited about this idea of doing a startup, and eventually it lined up where it was the perfect time for me to leave Google. Google Plus had just launched. A lot of the work that was being done in Waterloo was being shifted to Mountain View. I'd been at Google for 5 years, so I was pretty excited to do something new. And the timing was kind of perfect, and John and I shared a lot of the same passions and same ideas. So.
Cool. And so, can you tell us a little bit about kind of the origins of Relay? Like, I know you guys were working on some different ideas. You had tried some different prototypes. Can you walk us through the kind of like, yeah. Day one, we want to do a startup. How did you start, and how did you get to Relay?
Yep. So I think the thing that we were very excited about from day one was this idea that, chatting is this very fundamental thing that like people like to do online. Like, chatting has been here pretty much almost as early as there's been internet, there's been chatting. I mean, I feel like chatting is kind of one of the first things that, in the DARPA days, one of the sort of first applications. And, you might think that now that there is, VoIP and video calling, maybe people are going to stop chatting. All evidence points to like people are not going to stop chatting. People love like asynchronous chatting. What we got excited about was this idea that chatting and content go really well together. And I think there's a real world parallel to this, which is like, conversation and content go hand in hand. Like it's more fun to watch the Super Bowl with your friends. It's more fun to watch funny YouTube videos with your friends. So the chatting and the conversation reinforces the content, and the content kind of reinforces the conversation. And how can we take that kind of real world experience and build a product that lets you do that, I guess, virtually? And so the very first thing that we built was a web product which let you watch YouTube videos together synchronously and have a chat about it. It was kind of like, I don't know if anyone here remembers turntable.fm.
Yeah.
So this was like these chat rooms where somebody could be the DJ, and you could take turns being the DJ. So this was kind of like Turntable, but for YouTube videos. We made two important discoveries really early on. The first was that this was a web product, and the sort of notification system was all through email. So you'd be notified, hey, you've been invited to this video chat room. You'd get an email, and a bunch of people were telling us they're getting these emails on their phones. And it wasn't a mobile product; it was a web product. So, they just couldn't use it. They get the notification. By the time they got to their computer, the video was over, or the chat was over. And then the second big thing we learned was that we had kind of anchored the chats around a specific piece of content. So it would be like, for this video, there'd be a chat room, and then for a different video, there'd be a different chat room. And it got kind of awkward when the video finished. People wanted to watch another piece of content. So this sort of led us to, well, the conversations should really be pivoted around the group of people. And so at that point, we sort of realized, okay, we need to go mobile, and we really need to be building a group messaging application with kind of deep content integration. So version 1 of Relay was YouTube videos, and we actually threw in, we had, you could do a web search, you could do an image search, so we had all these different kinds of content. And then, animated GIFs were kind of like a hack project. We just hacked in one day for fun. And, pretty quickly the data started to tell us that GIFs were what people really wanted them.
Cool. And so, once you guys had that mobile app and the GIFs had been injected and you started to notice that people are spending a lot of time inside the GIF, what was your next step? Like, how did you guys start building a community around that and adding on to that product?
So I think I think we did a couple of things early on that were really valuable, and I would encourage you all to do if you haven't done it already. So first thing is you have to be looking at data. You have to be obsessively looking at data. And so the first step is, you need to instrument your app or your product. So we used a tool called Mixpanel. I'm sure most of you know what it is. So we'd, all different kinds of actions that the user would take in the app, we'd set up with Mixpanel events. So opening a chat, starting a new chat, adding a friend, we had events for all that stuff. Mixpanel, it's a great kind of data store, and the default Mixpanel UI, I think, is great for kind of exploring and dicing your data in all kinds of different ways. But the second thing we did is you have to have like your own dashboard, because you really need to kind of decide what are your key metrics, and you need to be looking at those metrics and obsessing over them every day. So if you just rely on kind of the default Mixpanel UI with like tons and tons of data, you're going to get overwhelmed. You need to like distill it down to, the key metrics that you look at every day.
What were you guys looking at, just to get an idea?
So the most important, we discovered pretty quickly the most important thing to us was sort of what percentage of our new users were coming in through referrals. And the reason why that was so important is we drew out these retention charts. So this is a kind of a chart where you see like, okay, so many people sign up on day 0, and then it kind of goes down. How many people come back 1 day later, 2 days later, 3 days later, 7 days later, 30 days later? It goes down like that. If we, on one graph, if we put the chart of, the 30-day retention chart for people that had at least one friend versus people that had no friends, there was like this massive difference. So I'm sure you've probably heard that thing about like the early days of Facebook. They found out like as soon as somebody had 7 friends, they were highly likely to turn into an engaged Facebook user. Well, that was kind of our eureka moment, and seems pretty obvious in retrospect, but if you get friend matched with somebody, you were going to stick around in Relay. If you didn't, you weren't. And so, if you think of the new people coming into Relay were either, top of the funnel, just like finding it in the App Store or finding it somewhere, versus people who are finding it through a friend, those viral people were much, much more valuable than everybody else. And so focusing on what percentage of our new users are coming in through those viral channels and just trying to get that number up obsessively is, I believe, what ultimately led us to get some real traction.
Mm-hmm. What were some of those viral channels? Like what distribution channels did you guys use? How did you get a whole bunch of users into the app?
That's a great question. So I think, I don't know if it's Peter Thiel who says that most companies have, you're lucky if you get one distribution channel that works. Mm-hmm. So I think it's really important that you only need one. So try to find that one, and then when you find the one that's working, forget everything else and just like keep working on making that one better. It's really easy to get distracted by like all these other cool sounding viral channels, but when you find one that works, forget everything else. So the first thing you need to know is like where are your users coming from, and this can be a little challenging to do on mobile because people are installing an app in the App Store. How do you know where they found that app? So we used a tool called mobile app tracking, which basically, pretty obvious name. Basically, you click on you create these tracking links. Somebody clicks on a link in Twitter and a mobile web browser, and it takes like a fingerprint of the device. And then when if that person then goes on to install your app, it takes another fingerprint and it tries to connect it back to, oh, this person tapped on this link and then they went on to install your app. So for all our viral links that went out, we would track those. So if somebody posted something like a Relay invitation on Twitter, we would track how many people click on that and then how many people sign up. If somebody posted a Facebook link, same thing. So we had Facebook, Twitter, email, SMS, and for all those, it could either be like a vanilla invite or you could share a piece of GIF content. Mm-hmm. And the only one that worked of those was SMS.
Really?
Yeah. So Facebook was, nothing. There was the whole sort of promise of Open Graph. We got no installs through that. Twitter, almost no installs. Email was negligible, but SMS was pretty solid. But the number one viral channel was something that we called word of mouth, which meant that, so obviously that's a real thing, but we would attribute any user who was friend matched with somebody, but that we couldn't trace back to any of the other channels, that was a word of mouth match. That was sort of the lion's share of the viral referrals. And once we realized that, it really shifted our efforts towards, how do we just make this a product that delights people? How do we get people talking to their friends about this product? Mm-hmm. And it was really, I think, that realization that allowed us to kind of stay focused on that and ignore all these kind of red herrings that could really be big distractions.
Yeah, and it obviously worked. I mean, within the space of 2.5 to 3 years, you guys acquired 700,000 users who ended up sharing over 10 million gifts a month. And a lot of them actually happened in different kind of international markets, like Brazil.
Yeah.
So how did that happen, and how do you start supporting all of a sudden a bunch of Portuguese users?
Yeah. That was really funny actually, because I think the dream of like a consumer social startup is you just imagine like I don't know, do people here know about Meerkat? Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I think probably every like social consumer app founder wants something, dreams of something like that, right? Like you launch on TechCrunch and everyone's just like, oh, this is amazing. Everyone's talking about it. All the press kind of blows up overnight. And, that didn't happen for us. Like I was telling some people in the back, we launched on TechCrunch and maybe got 400 signups or something out of it, and just kind of fizzled off after that. But a year later, we did have our kind of out of the blue explosion, except it was in Brazil. Just totally random. So we started to kind of, every day we look at our App Annie charts to see what countries people were coming in from. We look at our mixed panel graphs, and all of a sudden, February 2014, one day we get 50 people from Brazil sign up out of the blue, and then the next day it's 200. The next day it's 800. We're like, well, what's going on in Brazil? Then I just remember, and at this time, you got to remember that whole first year before we started to get some real traction, we were kind of 100, kind of less than 1,000 people signing up a day, maybe 100 people signing up a day or something. And so we actually we had set up email notifications every time someone signed up, and I had push notifications on, so, every 10 minutes, 20 minutes, something, vibration, oh, new user, awesome, 20 minutes later, new user, awesome. So this Brazil thing starts happening, and I wake up one morning and my phone is just
Having a seizure.
And I'm like, something's going on, right? And I just come in and I see it, and I can't refresh fast enough. These emails are just pouring in. It's literally, and I go to the charts and it's literally one person signing up a second. I'm like, what the F's going on, right? And so anyway, get on Twitter, and all this Portuguese, all these people relay. We trace it back to this. There's this Brazilian celebrity blogger, this guy named Hugo Gloss. So you got to go check out his website.
Sounds like a gangster name.
So Hugo Gloss wrote a blog post about Relay, and I guess this guy is kind of like the Perez Hilton of Brazil, and he's got 2 million Twitter followers, and that blog post just kind of set off this firestorm of Brazilian users. Got all this, got press in kind of the biggest newspaper in Sao Paulo. We were on the sort of the nightly news in Brazil, so we had this kind of surreal moment where we're all sitting around our office in Toronto, we found a stream of the news in Brazil, and it's all these people sitting around newscasters. They've got GIFs up on the thing, and they're speaking in Portuguese about Relay GIF Messenger, and we're like, oh, this is super trippy. So yeah, I think I think the lesson there is that your growth can kind of come from anywhere, and we really are living in these big international markets are reality, and so you should definitely try to do things to encourage that growth.
Mm-hmm.
We actually weren't localized at the time that started picking up, but then we sort of very quickly localized into Portuguese, but also into 10 other languages, and I think that really helped us, because then from Brazil we started to spread into other Latin American countries, got pretty big in Mexico, and it kind of started to spill over into Spain and other parts of Europe. Yeah.
That's cool. So earlier you mentioned that the paid installs didn't work so well. It was mostly word of mouth and the whole SMS that worked, and then the Hugo Gloss picks you up. So did you guys use celebrities as another kind of way to reach a lot of people in different countries? Did that become part of the expansion plan?
No, I think we, I think it was nice that there were these sort of celebrities and kind of people that were big in social media, had sort of a natural interest in GIFs,
Mm-hmm.
and so we sort of accidentally got a lot of people that were pretty active on Twitter talking about Relay. But it was really, I think, just the kind of emotional, delightful experience that people had when they used the product that led them to start sharing it. And the Hugo Gloss things are nice. If somebody big writes about you, it's a nice bump, but it sort of pales in comparison to the compounding interest of a product that's viral.
Cool.
One big bump is great, but if all of those people then invite a certain number of their friends, and it's more than the number of people that are leaving, it's going to keep growing.
Yeah. And so a couple months later, in February 2013, you guys actually ended up raising about $700K from some pretty big name investors like Peter Thiel's investment group, the Social Capital Partnership, Graph Ventures, Real Ventures. So how did you do that? How did you craft a story and say that, hey, you know, gifts are going to be the next big thing, put some money into this?
Well, when we were raising money, we hadn't really narrowed in on gifts yet. We were still kind of in this just more broad messaging and content space. And this was pre-traction as well. This was kind of, you know, this is pre all the Brazil stuff. So this was, you know, basically my co-founder and myself and, you know, a pretty good product demo and a vision going around trying to convince people. And it was really hard. I guess that's the first thing. So yeah, I guess, you know, the first thing I would say is, you know, if, I don't know, has anyone here like raised money before?
There we go. One guy, two guys.
Okay, cool. Who here is thinking about raising money soon? Okay, cool. You know, I guess, you know, I would, you know, before you think about raising money, I would definitely like spend some time thinking about if you really need to. It can be a very time-consuming and, you know, demoralizing and grueling experience. And, you know, there are downsides to raising money as well in that, you know, you potentially lose a bit of your optionality, right? Like if you're a startup with just a few guys and you haven't raised any money, there's like a lot of different possible outcomes. But, you know, once you know, basically, you know, take $1 million with someone else's money, you know, you're going to feel a responsibility to get a return for those people or not lose their money. And all of a sudden there's new stakeholders. So I would say kind of the farther you can get without raising money, you know, try to do that. But if you want to raise money, you know, my experience from doing it myself and, you know, seeing other people raise money feels like venture capital is very binary. It's like you're either, you know, nobody wants to invest in you, or all of a sudden, like, everybody wants to invest in you. And you can be one company that goes from, like, the A column, and then, like, all of a sudden you're in the B column. And so the trick isn't just, you know, the thinking isn't like, how do I find an investor? It's like, how do I be the company that everybody wants to invest in? You know, some I think, you know, common pitfalls you want to watch out for is like, when you start meeting with investors, nobody is going to say like an outright no. This is, you know, I feel like, you know, this is another example of where, you know, working at a big company like Google, I don't feel like I was really prepared for like, you know, the startup world and like thinking about how a VC thinks, right? So remember, like as an entrepreneur, as a founder, like your full-time job is building product, writing code, you know, and fundraising is hopefully like a small part of your job. But for VCs, you know, they're spending 100% of their time meeting people, right? Getting deal flow. You know, I remember we met this one VC, this coffee shop in San Francisco, and the guy's like, what did he say? I think he said like, I meet with 500 startups a year. And I was like, 500 startups a year? Like, that's intense, man. That's like, you know, I don't know, like three every workday. Yeah. And that's what these guys do, right? And nobody wants to miss out on an amazing deal, so you never want to say no, because, you know, as an investor, if you say no and that company goes away and they turn out to be great, you've given up your optionality in investing in that company. So instead, you know, investors will say things that don't sound like no, but they actually mean no, right? So they'll say, you know, we really like you guys, this is awesome, you know, but, you know, we don't really do seed stage, so like, you know, come back and talk to us when you're doing your A, right? Or like, you know, this is great, we got a few more partners we need you to meet, like, can you come back in 2 weeks, right? And this stuff can be pretty dangerous because it can start sucking up a lot of your time. And, you know, also you're kind of potentially like giving away information, right? Like, you know, investors have other reasons for wanting to get information from startups. So the people that say yes will typically say yes, like very quickly. So, you know, if you're raising money in the Valley, you know, you want to try to meet as many people as possible. kind of recognize the no's that aren't actually no, and try to find those yeses as quickly as possible.
And so how do you balance your time as a founder? I mean, you guys weren't a big team, right? There's only a couple of you guys.
Yeah.
How do you balance between building a product, continuing the growth, and then also kind of, spending a bit of time fundraising?
Yep.
Especially if it's your
Yeah, I mean, we spent about probably 4 months total fundraising. So we started flying down to the Valley in September. I guess it was September 2012, and then closed the round, just sort of after Christmas. And if you look at our GitHub graphs of how many commits we're doing, it's how much code we're submitting. It's really high all through the summer. It's really high, and then all of a sudden September hits, and it's just flat, pretty much all until the round was closed. Yeah. We weren't working on the product at all. And no, I think that's the reality. When you're fundraising, you need to be 100% focused on it, and you just got to get it done as quickly as possible. I wouldn't try to do both at the same time.
Okay, cool. And so, recently, November 2014, you guys got acquired by Kik, which is another Canadian Waterloo-based company.
Yep.
Pretty popular messaging app. So, why did you guys decide to join them? How did it happen, and
Yep.
why Kik?
Yep. It's interesting. I think, I said a little while ago, I'm a huge believer in chat, that chat is this massive opportunity. It's been, a fundamental part of people's online experience for a long time. I feel like in mobile, it's even more, it's even sort of more kind of fundamental part of the mobile experience. And, I think people have sort of continued to kind of underestimate how big of an opportunity mobile messaging is. So when I was working at Google, on Google Plus at Google, that's when kind of the first wave of messaging apps launched. So there was an app called Beluga, which ended up getting acquired by Facebook and turning into Facebook Messenger. There was GroupMe that got acquired by Skype for, I think, 80 million, 70 million. Kik launched around the same time. And if you talk to the founder of Kik, Ted Livingston, around that time when Beluga's getting bought for 40 million, WhatsApp's getting bought for 80 million, a lot of people were telling him Ted, man, you're just out of university, you got a startup, you could sell it today for 100 million.
BlackBerry was giving them problems.
Yeah, it's why don't you do it, man? You could put it $100 million bucks in your pocket. Fast forward to a year ago, and WhatsApp, who came around at that same time, stuck around, stayed independent, sold to Facebook for 19 billion. And I believe that's still, we still haven't fully realized how big of an opportunity messaging is. And I think it's that mobile messaging is really going to become the new web portals on mobile. Mobile messaging apps are going to be the way that people discover content and business and commerce on mobile devices. And there's starting to be quite a bit of evidence of that in the market. So a great example is WeChat in China. So a lot of people in China are coming online for the first time. They're not coming online on desktop devices, they're coming online on mobile phones. And the first application that everyone uses on their mobile device in China is WeChat. It's the messaging social network to use there. But it's also the place where people discover what kind of insurance they want to buy. You can refinance your mortgage through WeChat. You can order taxis through WeChat. And so there's this whole sort of world of people that are coming online for the first time. They don't know really what the web is necessarily or what Google is. They can discover all the information and services what they need through this messaging app. And the parallel to that in North America is teenagers or youth. They're coming online for the first time. They're not using desktop computers. They're using mobile phones. And I think it'd be interesting to ask teenagers in the U.S. Do you really know what Google is? Right? I would bet that there's a lot of people that I'm sure they know what Apple is. I'm sure they know what Instagram is. I'm sure they know what Facebook is. But do they really sort of know what Google and the web is? And so Kik specifically is very dominant among U.S. youth. That's always been our beachhead. We are kind of, look at the App Store charts or the Google Play charts in the US, we're like consistently, very highly ranked. And that's a very valuable demographic, and it's a demographic of people that are coming online for the first time and, just getting ready to kind of, figure out their sort of brand preferences and their kind of preferences in online behavior and content. And so we saw Kik as being, one of the last independent messaging apps, massive audience, extremely valuable audience, and also a company that's been thinking about messaging as a platform kind of before anybody else. I mean, they started doing platform stuff 3 years ago. So we had huge admiration for them, saw it as a huge opportunity, and there was just a great alignment of vision as well around, messaging being a way of distributing content. Mm-hmm. So basically, it was kind of the perfect way of, uniting our businesses to build something bigger. The alternative would have been, we raise more venture capital and we try to build, our own big, almost competing sustainable business. But by working together, we can leverage their massive existing network. They can leverage some of our technology and experience, and I think basically have a better shot of competing on a world stage.
Mm-hmm. So not to lead you down a path where you can't answer a bunch of questions, but what do you think about some of the new messaging apps and platform that was released by Facebook yesterday?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's really exciting. I think it's just validation that, I think Facebook is an incredible company, and like Zuck is like obviously a brilliant guy. So the fact that he recognizes what a big opportunity this is just reinforces, what an important space, an important race this is. Mm-hmm. So I'm excited by it. I think, the worst situation is where like nobody realizes like how important it is that we're doing, and now, the fact that Facebook is clearly like putting so much firepower behind that, I think a lot of people are going to realize how valuable of a company Kik is. I mean, Mark Zuckerberg has said himself, like, messaging is the one thing that people do more than social networking.
It's pretty intense.
Yep.
So what's next for Relay as part of Kik? Like, I know you've been there a little while now.
Yep.
I saw that you had your first like product release with them. So
yep.
What's that whole process like? What's it like being part of the team?
Yeah, it's been awesome. We've integrated really well. I mean, they're a startup as well, so a lot of the processes and technologies are really similar. So yeah, we launched video messaging a few weeks ago, and we've got a lot of other cool stuff coming in the pipe around sharing rich media within chats.
Okay, cool. If you were to give some advice to entrepreneurs, what would you encourage them to do more of? And alternatively, what would you, I guess, after focus, encourage them to do less of? Would be to stop getting distracted. So.
Yeah, more focus, less distraction. I would definitely say I wouldn't spend a lot of time comparing yourself to other companies. That's something that I felt like I did a bit early on, both to companies that seemed similar to ours but maybe seemed slightly more successful. I'd spend time thinking, oh, maybe we should be doing what they're doing because they look a lot like us, but they're a little farther along. I would say I spent too much time thinking about would-be competitors. So anytime anyone launched a new GIF-related app, I would sort of obsess about, are they going to like steal our spotlight? They're going to be huge, and we're going to be forgotten. The reality is most of those would be competitors. They're going to have all the same problems and challenges that you have. Like just getting users is not easy. If it's not easy for you, it's not going to be easy for anyone. And all that stuff is just distracting. You really need to stay focused on your own business and really focused on making a great experience for your users.
Mm-hmm. And just one last question before I flip it over to the crowd to ask some more intelligent questions than I have. I'm just curious. It's something we don't touch on a lot. What's it like building a startup with a partner who you have to sell the vision on just as much as your co-founder and some investors in some cases?
So you mean my wife?
Yes.
Yeah. I was extremely lucky, I think, because my wife's a professor at the University of Toronto. So I guess, she has a stable job, so the financial stability is, part of it wasn't as much of an issue. I think, for her, the biggest concern is, hey, is this thing going to be all-consuming, or are you going to still have time for us? And, but she was, I guess, extremely supportive and, encouraged me to do it kind of from day one and, really kind of, I guess, helped kind of give me the flexibility to do it.
Mm-hmm.
I think the most important thing was just kind of managing expectations, being upfront about, how many hours I was planning on spending on work and, how many years I thought I'd be doing the startup. And,
cool.
Yeah.
And it's worked out great, obviously.
Yeah, it worked out well.
Cool. So one more question.
Okay.
Are there any cool tools, books, or apps that you're using right now? Anything that you're, kind of
Yeah.
besides Kick?
I mentioned a few, if you're not using Mixpanel, definitely check it out. Mobile app tracking, not as many people have heard about, but it's a really powerful tool for understanding if an app install came from a click somewhere else. One of the clever things we did was mobile app tracking lets you do these callbacks, so you can, every time there's an install attributed, it can make a callback to your server to run some code. So we took our mobile app tracking data and fed it into Mixpanel that way, so we could see in Mixpanel where users had come from in the beginning. So then we could cohort users by, this is the cohort of people that came in, from Twitter, from SMS, things like that. What other tools? I don't know. I'm using Meerkat a lot right now.
Yeah.
I really like it. Not broadcasting, just watching stuff. What else? Yeah.
That's cool. You can mention it maybe
Yeah.
if anything later on over yours. All right. Cool. So do you guys have any questions? Yeah. Here, we'll start at the front and I'll work my way back.
So you're talking to us about the wife and whatnot.
Yeah.
How many hours do you work in a startup, and do you find yourself working less now than you were part of Kick than you were in your startup?
I think my co-founder and I both sort of decided that we were both big believers in sustainable momentum. So, a startup is a marathon; it's not a sprint. If we're going to be working on this thing for 3 years, 5 years, 10 years, we don't want to burn ourselves out. So we tried to work pretty regular hours. So 9 to 6 in the office. We really tried to take our weekends, and we took vacations as well. So we didn't kill ourselves. For me, and I really think that worked. I think if we, sometimes in shorter time frames, it felt like we weren't getting enough done. But then when we look back at what we got done in 6 months or what we got done in a year, it was a lot. And also, I think our engineering practices helped with that a lot. So we would take the time to build things well, which at the time felt like, hey, we could just hack this together way more quickly and get something out to market. But then it ended up saving us time later on when, we had far fewer bugs to fix, or because we had such a good foundation, it was a lot faster to build new features on top of it. So I would say the biggest difference between running your own company and working for a company, even if it's a startup, is there's just slightly more. I think there's quite a bit more stress when kind of the buck stops at you when you're responsible for everything. So I found it a lot harder as the founder of a startup to kind of stop thinking about work. So yeah, I'd be at home, I'd be at dinner, or I'd be giving one of my kids a bath, and I'm still thinking about work. And so, I think working for somebody else's company has been kind of a nice psychological break, and that I can I can take a bit more of a break about thinking about work on the weekends.
Monty, I think you
I
had
have a few questions.
Yep.
What was the dynamics of your team like? How many people were coding? How many doing marketing? How many looking at data?
Yep.
How many doing operations?
Yep. We had an extremely small team, so we were 4 people. And it was basically my co-founder and I were both engineers. We had 1 other full-time engineer and 1 community manager. And I would say kind of 80% of the effort of the company was like engineering. It's a lot of building. Yeah.
What about marketing and data?
Yeah, we kind of all looked at data. Yeah.
Second question is, you talked a lot about virality.
Yep.
What was your sweet spot for the viral coefficient that you saw the hockey stick effect, per se?
Right. I don't know if we had a graph that was exactly the viral coefficient. I mean,
Oh, it does that. I was expecting it 5 minutes later, but sorry.
I mean, if your viral coefficient is greater than 1, then you have hockey stick growth.
Was it like 1.1, 1.2, 1.05, right?
Yeah, I don't remember. But there was certainly a very clear transition when it went from kind of flat to like growing very fast. Yeah.
Oh, is it like just a quick?
That's a good follow-up,
Yeah,
though.
go for it.
What were you doing in the meantime when it's flat? Were you stressing out for that period?
Absolutely. Yeah. Well, okay, not at the beginning, right? Because you hope when you do launch that it's going to start growing right away, but it's okay that it doesn't. Because we launched sort of right after we had the funding, so we knew we had 18 months of runway, and so we expected we'd be taking time to figure it out. And that's when you're experimenting, right? You've got for us we had our steady stream of users coming in through Facebook ads every day, and we're looking at the data, trying to find those key insights, and then we're experimenting. So we're launching features, measuring it. That didn't work. Launch something else, measure it. That didn't work. We keep doing that. Now, when you're doing it for a year, as we had, and nothing's working, and now all of a sudden, like the end of the runway is in sight, that's when you start to get a little nervous. And so I remember, last year, like when we came back after Christmas, we had like 6 to 8 months of runway left. Nothing seemed to be working. We had this kind of, hard like sit down with the whole team. My co-founder put together this deck where we talked about like the relay growth problem. And the first slide of the relay growth problem deck was this graph, and it was like a big line across the graph. The relay growth problem, it's flat. How do we fix the problem? At that point, we were actually like very close to nailing things. And so, just a few more changes, a few more insights, and then the growth really started to pick up. Mm-hmm. But like some examples are, when we discovered that like getting matched with a friend was like the most important predictor of retention, we did this like new sign up and friend matching sprint. I call it a sprint, but it was actually like a month of work. We spent a month, completely redesigned our sign up flow all around like, if you have a friend that's on Relay, like we're going to match you with them. And like if you want to invite friends to Relay, we're going to make it super easy for you to do that. So we did, Facebook matching, we did address book matching, we did like reverse address book matching, just did like everything we could think of. So that's what we added like search by name. We did like recommended friends, kind of based on who you were already friends with. We'd recommend other people that might be good friend candidates, and all that stuff worked. So it was the process of like doing that again and again on different insights until like
It all came together.
It all came together.
Right here, now go to the back.
So, you mentioned working at Google and some
Yep.
of the pluses and minuses.
Yep.
So the question is, for somebody starting out, would you recommend they get a job, get experience, then do the startup thing, or the other way around, or it doesn't matter? That's question number one. And number two, what's your ideal environment?
Yep.
Do you value access to services, mentors, space,
Yep.
talent. So if you're going to give somebody some advice as to where to locate their startup, where to go,
Yep.
what would your advice be?
Okay, so yeah, first question is, I mentioned the ups and downs of Google, so for somebody starting out, would you recommend working at a big company? It's tough because I haven't been able to A/B test that in my life. I only did the one path, and it worked out reasonably well. I would say, Google taught me to be a great engineer, to value, making decisions based on data. It's a good stamp to have on your resume. It makes you seem like pretty credible. So I think that was helpful with recruiting a team and raising money. But I really don't feel like Google prepared me for the many challenges of doing a startup. Potentially working for a startup would be a better way to prepare for startup life. And it's actually, I find it really interesting now working for a startup that's much farther along than Relay got. Working for a startup, you're really going to see all the challenges that a startup faces. You're going to see how they kind of get from 10 people to 100 people, potentially get more exposure to investors in that world. But kind of from what I've heard, and I guess what I experienced, the best way to learn to do startups is to do a startup. Throw yourself into the fire. I don't know. Paul Graham has a really good talk as part of the CS 183B startup school lectures, where he talks about this question, like should you do a startup like while you're in university or right out of university, and he's got some interesting advice. I'd watch that as well. There's also the bigger question of like, not only how to be successful at a startup, but like how to have a happy life. And he's saying like, well, when you're in your early 20s, when you're in your university, you actually don't want to do a startup because that's not necessarily the best way to have a happy life. And he gives the example of like Mark Zuckerberg can never like kind of go backpacking around Thailand and like kind of, serendipitously like wherever the wind takes him. Like when he goes to Thailand, like he's flying on a private jet and like, so yeah.
Yeah. And then about location for resources and space and that kind of stuff?
Again, it's tough because I've only started one startup, so I only have a sample size of one. I definitely look at friends that have started companies in the Valley, and I see all the benefits that they have, but all the challenges as well. Doing a startup in Toronto or KW, different benefits, different challenges. I think you have to have like a source of engineering talent. So, either there needs to be an existing tech scene or like schools with good engineering programs nearby. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, it's a very like global economy now, so you don't necessarily need local investors. Like you can fly to the Valley, you can raise money there. You need space. I don't know.
Yeah, that's a fair answer. Yeah.
Yeah.
So we'll start with you, and then I'll come back, Alan.
I just wonder,
Yeah.
there are many social networks you have on Facebook with
Yeah.
Plus, Twitter, and the
Yeah.
Relay. So what's the thing in each has a strength, and it has its own unique
Yeah.
characteristics. So what's makes your site stand out? I'm sorry, I'm not in here yet.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Go back and check out.
Well, so I can talk about. Oh,
Yeah.
yeah.
My other question, just in terms of because I work on some nonprofit things, like in terms of the social causes,
Yeah.
how do you see it as useful?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I can talk about Relay first, but sadly, Relay is gone now. So when we got acquired, we shut it down. But while it existed, I think our big differentiator was we gave people a very high emotion, low friction way to communicate. So animated GIFs, if you're familiar with them, they're very like densely packed, short little video clips with no audio. So it's like a lot of entertaining stuff going on in a very small package. And we tried to build Relay to be very frictionless. So you could send people these GIFs, with only a couple of taps. And we put a lot of engineering work into making sure the GIFs loaded extremely fast. And so we had a kind of a chatting experience that was very emotional and expressive with very little friction. And that's what seemed to resonate with people. So the company that I work on now, which is Kik, I think Kik grew for different reasons. Kik grew because they were in the space very early on. They came out around the same time as WhatsApp, GroupMe, and Beluga. And they were the first, of those first entrants, they didn't require a phone number. So they were username-based registration. So at that time, for WhatsApp, you had to have a phone number. GroupMe and Beluga, I think you had to have a phone number. From the beginning, Kik was totally username-based. And so we became very popular among US youth who didn't have phone numbers. They had iPod Touches, they had hand-me-down Android phones, they had iPads. They wanted to be chatting and SMSing with friends, and this was basically a way to have an SMS experience without a phone number. And that's kind of continued to be our beachhead. It was kind of now we have the network effect of we're very dominant among that demographic. Kik users also use their usernames to meet people online. So like if you do an Instagram search for the hashtag Kik, there's like 25 million posts with people just posting their Kik usernames. You see it all over Twitter as well. A lot of like online kind of gaming forums, people will put their Kik username in their profile. It's kind of the way to chat with people that you meet on other networks. So that's the big differentiator, I think, username-based chatting. In terms of how could Kik be leveraged for nonprofits, we have our product for people to connect with brands and companies is called Promoted Chats. So you can create an official chat account that people can chat with, and you can basically program a bot to chat with people. So for example, MTV is one of our recent partners. You can chat with the MTV bot, and you can say things like news, and it'll send you news. You can say things like music, it'll send you music. It's very easy to sort of get content from MTV and get to their site. So for a nonprofit, I would say this would be a way that if you were interested in sharing your story with that younger demographic, then a Kik promoted account would be a great way to do that.
Cool. Alan, and then we'll work back to you guys. Sorry.
Yeah, just expanding on the social cause of things. I just wondered, I was reading something in the New York Times the other day about how the youth of today, they just don't have the attention like perhaps other people used to at school just 5 years ago, because everyone's on some kind of a messaging app and everything's short, bite-sized information, alerts going off left, right, and center. And at the end of the article, it kind of summarizes that this may not necessarily be a bad thing, and this may just be the way technology is moving, and that if that's what they're going to have to deal with in the workplace, then they're getting ready for it at a young age.
Mm-hmm.
I just wondered how you, when you've worked on a GIF messaging app, which it's a disruptive thing, it's disturbing. You want people to stop what they're doing and look at the GIF and then reply. Yeah. I just wondered, how does that sit with you? I don't know if you have kids, but like when you're trying to get someone to do some homework or even just be effective in the workplace, you're being bombarded left, right, and center with these things, and there's so many of these messaging apps now. I just wondered where you think that sits with the landscape going forward.
Yep. I mean, I think it's interesting. I wonder if it's too early to tell. How will people that are growing up with this kind of experience, how will their brains adapt to it? Like personally, I certainly feel like the constant interruptions, the constant push notifications, can have like a negative effect on my ability to focus and get work done, and so I try to think about ways to limit that personally so I can be more productive. But I wonder if, the younger kids who are sort of growing up used to that way of thinking.
Do you see the irony in that you struggle with it yourself, yet you're building something that does
Right.
that? So I just wondered, is there, as entrepreneurs, as developers, should we be trying to solve these problems, or should we be trying to get as many users as possible and gain as much as possible? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. I don't know. I mean, I think that entrepreneurs should be trying to solve this problem I think there's probably startup opportunities in trying to solve this problem for people, but I don't know as a developer of an individual app like this whether they should feel any guilt that they're, any moral obligation to not create, not
I don't mean
unleash.
guilt, but I guess, yeah, maybe I'll
Yeah.
speak to you later about
It's an interesting
ideas
question.
in that space, but I think it's something that we don't know yet, because
Yeah.
kids, we don't know what's going to happen in 5 years' time and how they're going to graduate from high school and college and
Yeah.
stuff, and how that's going to turn into the workplace. you
Yeah.
know?
I know where you're trying to come from, but it's kind of a complicated question. Yeah, go ahead.
For the initial user acquisition in the very early days, how
Yeah.
did you do it? Facebook?
Yeah, so we for our kind of top of the funnel, like just getting people in, we didn't try too much because at the time our app install ads on Facebook were about 50 cents a user, and we were spending like $10 a day or something. It's kind of enough to like be getting people in. We tried Tapjoy, which was really cheap, and the users were really awful. That was something that was really nice, is we set up early on like retention charts for cohorts for where users were coming from, so we could look at the cohort of Facebook app install users and see like what their retention curve looks like, and like literally the Tapjoy user retention curve was like dropped to 0 at one day. Like, I mean, indistinguishable from 0, at least on our graphs. We experimented with, we kind of set up a Tumblr blog, and we ended up getting a small size following on Twitter and Facebook, but press would give us, once we were more successful, press would give us these bumps, but really it was just like Facebook app install ads at the beginning, so we had a steady flow of people to test stuff on, and then this like viral engine that eventually just started working, and then eventually like dwarfed everything else. Yeah. Like an example is like once our stuff was really working, we like randomly like ended up on Product Hunt one day, and I remember they emailed us after and said like, how was the Product Hunt like bump, but at that time like by that point, by the time we were on there, like the new users that were coming in virally was so much bigger, like we couldn't really distinguish these kind of one-off bumps anymore.
Cool. What about the technology? Just quickly,
Yep.
back-end technology.
Yeah, we basically built our own kind of custom real-time backend with Java, using something called the Play framework. And that was hosted on like bare metal machines in a data center hosted by a company called SoftLayer, which is kind of similar to Rackspace.
Cool. Mark, sorry, I forgot about you at the back.
Joe, remind me, short memory.
Yeah.
How long was your company active from start to acquisition?
I should know this exactly. It was a little under 3 years.
3 years. So
Yeah, 2.5 years.
you mentioned your Gits.
Yeah.
You mentioned at some point a rapidly expanding user base.
Yeah.
I didn't hear anything about more fundamental technology or patents. What were the value drivers that caused you to be acquired?
We did have patent applications. I would say it was kind of our core technology around video and media. Particularly some of the video and media stuff that we did on Android. So it was both some of our some of that IP, and then also just our expertise in that area. The two businesses like really lined up, like both in terms of the tech that we'd built, but also kind of our expertise, and yeah.
It's a good fit. Any other questions for Joe? Alan?
Until you just answered that question, then I didn't realize, I'd never really thought of asking about patents and stuff.
Yeah.
But it seems quite unusual to hear about a 4-man startup
Yep.
messaging app that has patents. So that I wondered if that was actually something that you saw very early on, if you had advice on it, or because I think a lot of people in this room probably wouldn't even consider patenting anything they're working on.
Right.
The ex-Googler in you was like, patent it.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely like around when I was leaving Google, there was all of a sudden this big push for software patents.
Because it's not cheap, and you have to get advice, and you have to know what you're doing. So, and you're not coding when you're doing that as well. So I wondered, like,
Yeah.
when did you decide, okay, we're going to patent this section of code because no one else is doing this, you know, or it's going to be worth something? How did that thought process work out?
You know, I think we just thought that it would be, you know, yeah, potentially valuable down the line. You know, certainly I think in an acquisition type scenario.
Was it?
I think it was a factor. Yeah.
So you have, you
I mean,
you
it's
built
hard to
stuff
say.
in Relay which is patented, which Kik are now using?
Provisional patent application.
Okay.
Patent will probably take a while to go through.
Okay, but that is, okay, that's interesting.
There you go.
PCT
Okay.
or?
Oh,
Sorry.
no, go ahead, George.
Did you do the full PCT global?
I think we just did US and Canada. Yeah.
Cool. Well, if that's it, then, one more, go for it. Right at the end there.
Last question. What is your current job description
Yeah.
now at Kik, and like, what do you do on a day-to-day basis? Are you a heavy coder, or you just kind of manage?
So it's kind of a hybrid position of, you know, kind of product manager, engineer. So I've got a small team, you know, we're all focused on these video and media related messaging features. So I'm kind of I am the product lead for that team. But, you know, at a company at Kik size, there's still a lot of engineering work to be done. And, you know, so I
How big is Kik?
We're about 70 people.
70 people.
Yeah. So I still get my hands dirty coding.
Okay, last one. Oh.
You believe strongly in messaging first, right? You said that many times.
Yep.
How do you see photo and video integrating with that?
Yeah, I mean, I really believe that kind of, you know, we're seeing a trend towards more and more visual forms of communication. Obviously, like Snapchat is the prime example of that. You know, we just launched video messaging on Kik. It's been very successful. So I think, you know, again, it goes back to that like emotion over friction thing. Like video and photo content is like very emotional, and if you can allow people to communicate in that way with as little friction as possible, you're going to get a product that people use over and over again. So that kind of went into the design of our video and camera and Kik, try to like make it as frictionless as possible.
Last one.
How important, I mean, did you have any mentor start your entrepreneurial journey? And if so, like, did it play like a big role in like just helping you get to, kind of like navigate the port and get to wherever you want to get to?
Yep. Yeah, we had some really good mentors. You know, I think we had a few that were kind of official mentors to the company, you know, that we had regular meetings with. Myself and my co-founder would meet with these mentors on a regular schedule. And that was really valuable. I also have a few like personal mentors that I can just kind of like pick up the phone and call anytime, you know, for emotional support or like really hard problems. Yeah. So I think it's good to have both. You know, someone who's kind of more of an official mentor, a structured thing, and then someone that you know, is a bit more of a confidant. You can just kind of like call anytime.
Absolutely, it's a huge help. All right, guys, please join me in giving a huge round of applause to Joey. All the way up.
Yeah, thank you.